China is expanding its nuclear arsenal much more quickly than anticipated. A Pentagon report says Beijing could have 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. The rising number of cases of COVID-19 in Europe is of grave concern, and the region could see another 500,000 deaths by early next year. That is a warning from the World Health Organization. We also have some breaking news on COVID in just the last few moments. UK regulators have approved Merck's Molnupiravir, which is the first oral antiviral for treating COVID-19. As I say, breaking news just in the last few minutes. Israel's coalition government passes its first budget in over 3 years after a marathon Knesset debate. As India marks Diwali, the festival of lights, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi celebrates with soldiers in Jammu and Kashmir, keeping up with his practice of marking the festival with army personnel.
It's called the All-American Diwali, and it's taking place here at the iconic World Trade Center in New York City.
And from New York to India, and very much so here in London, the world celebrates Diwali. A Pentagon investigation into the last US drone strike conducted in Kabul has concluded. The strike killed 10 people in Kabul, including innocent children. The Pentagon says it was a tragic mistake, but did not violate any laws. The report admits to errors in its execution due to factors like confirmation bias and communication breakdown. The review by Air Force Lieutenant General Sami did not recommend any disciplinary action.
The investigation found no violation of law, including the law of war. Did find execution errors confirmed by combined with confirmation bias and communication breakdowns that regrettably led to civilian casualties. The
review stressed the context surrounding the strike was important. On the 26th of August, a suicide bombing claimed hundreds of lives. US forces were being flooded with information about threats to troops and civilians at the Kabul airport. The report concludes that US forces genuinely believed the car they were following for 8 hours was an imminent threat of an ISIS terrorist planning another attack.
Individuals involved in the strike interviewed during this investigation truly believed at the time that they were targeting an imminent threat to U.S. forces on H-Kaya. The intended target of the strike, the vehicle, the white Corolla, its contents and occupant, were genuinely assessed at the time to be a threat to U.S. forces.
Sami's report, endorsed by Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, also made several recommendations for improvements, including that more be done to prevent what military officials call confirmation bias. That's the idea that troops making the strike decision were too quick to conclude that what they were seeing aligned with the intelligence available. Sami also recommended the military improve its procedures to ensure that children and other innocent civilians are not present before launching a time-sensitive strike. Next to Ethiopia, where rebel forces say they will advance on the capital city. The Ethiopian conflict has killed thousands of people, with over 400,000 facing famine in the nation. It's been 1 year since the start of the war, which is still escalating.
We will bury the enemy with our blood and bones. Those were the words of Ethiopia's Nobel Peace Prize winning President Abiy Ahmed. He was speaking in Addis Ababa on Wednesday as he marked 1 year since war broke out in the northern Tigray region, and amid fears the conflict could be heading for the capital.
The pit which is dug will be very deep. It will be where the enemy is buried, not where Ethiopia disintegrates.
Ethiopia declared a state of emergency on Monday. That order prompted by claims from the Tigray People's Liberation Front that its forces had captured several towns in recent days and might march on the capital. The TPLF's forward position is around 235 miles to the north. Authorities in Addis have told residents to register their weapons and prepare to defend their neighbourhoods. The 6-month state of emergency enables the government to order citizens into military service. Engineer Merkel-Macron was among Addis residents who said they were ready to heed the call.
I am young. I will participate in the war, in whatever young people should do. I am planning to head to the front line.
Authorities are also allowed, with a court order, to detain for the duration of the state of the emergency anyone suspected of collaborating with terrorist groups. The TPLF was designated as such in May. After the state of emergency was declared, there were scattered reports of ethnic Tigrayans being arrested in the capital. Addis Ababa police and a government spokesperson did not respond to phone calls requesting comment. The TPLF led Ethiopia's ruling coalition for nearly 30 years, until Abiy came to power. Relations then soured, escalating into the conflict that has killed thousands, forced more than 2 million from their homes, and left 400,000 people in Tigray facing famine. As fighting has spread beyond Tigray, it has destabilised what was considered a stable Western ally in the volatile Horn of Africa region. On Wednesday, neighbouring Kenya said its national police had heightened security and vigilance along the border. The African Union said its chair was following the situation with deep concern and urged parties to enter into dialogue.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson finds himself in the middle of a controversy. A couple of controversies, actually. In the last few minutes, we've heard that his government is U-turning on a controversial standards issue with regards to policing the behaviour of MPs. But another controversy he's facing is that as he hosts the ongoing COP26 climate summit in Glasgow, Boris Johnson reportedly flew back to an exclusive private members' men-only club, the Garrick in the west of London, and it's understood he flew back by private jet. A spokesperson says the decision to fly was taken because of so-called time constraints, but members of the opposition parties have accused Boris Johnson of staggering hypocrisy. He is not the only one who chose convenience over the environment, though. A number of world leaders have made their way back home after announcing their respective climate goals. According to reports, more than 400 private jets carried business leaders and politicians to the summit, emitting 13,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide. US President Joe Biden travelled from Washington to Rome to Glasgow via Air Force One. He then deployed a massive motorcade. Critics say such leaders are eco-hypocrites. And global carbon dioxide emissions in the year 2021 are set to rebound to pre-pandemic levels. In China, pollution levels have increased. The country saw a massive economic stimulus to recover from lockdowns. China's one of the nations that didn't send its leader to the COP26 climate summit. It did send a delegation. China accounts for 31% of global emissions this year. The country's pledged to peak its emissions by 2030 and reach net zero by 2060. However, the government has announced economic projects which will see emissions grow 5.5% this year compared to 2019. A global carbon project consortium report says economic incentives are driving consumption, and this is in turn pushing industry, production and the use of coal. The report warns capping the rise in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels requires slashing carbon emissions in half by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. Its authors say it shows the reality that while leaders are in Glasgow pledging to tackle climate change. And rich nations are among the world's largest emitters of greenhouse gases, but it's the poorer countries that often pay the heaviest price for climate change. Now the United Nations has launched a plan to help the least developed countries fight climate hazards.
The United Nations has announced that it's rolling out funding plans to improve weather forecasting in vulnerable countries to further protect them from climate change, including 75 small island nations and least developed countries. The announcement was made at the big climate conference happening in Glasgow, COP26. The countries targeted by the initiative have done little to cause the climate crisis, but face the biggest and costliest impacts as climate change triggers deadly heatwaves, droughts and floods. The World Meteorological Organization said weather-related disasters have increased fivefold over the last 50 years, and more than 91% of the associated deaths have occurred in developing countries. The initiative aims to plug gaps in weather monitoring and data collection so developing countries can better prepare for climate-related disasters. For example, in recent years, weather data for Africa has declined as readings from weather balloons equipped with observation equipment decreased by about half between 2015 to 2020.
Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron. For the last few years, they've tried to lead Europe through multiple crises. So when it came to giving the German Chancellor a farewell, it was an emotional moment for both of them. Rather than a grand state dinner at the Élysée presidential palace in Paris, Emmanuel Macron invited her to the medieval town of Beaune for her farewell visit to France as the Chancellor of Germany. Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte welcomed Merkel and her husband Joachim Sauer to the 15th century Hospices de Beaune, a former hospital that now houses an annual charity auction of Burgundy wines. He presented Merkel with France's highest award, the Grand Cross of the Legion of Honour. The French president thanked her for her patience with him and the lessons she's taught him. Macron's election in 2017 was the beginning of a close friendship that has seen a few rough patches, but both Macron and Merkel are champions of European integration and worked closely together during the COVID-19 crisis. Soon Emmanuel Macron will be dealing with a new German government and chancellor after recent elections in Germany.
In the middle, please, here. Thank you very much.
Tensions between Turkey and Iran are simmering. The high-profile arrest of Iranian agents in Turkey last month is the latest sign of growing tensions between the neighbours. Our partner, Voice of America, reports.
Turkish security forces arresting Iranian agents who Turkey says were attempting to kidnap an Iranian dissident. Video of the October arrest was widely distributed, embarrassing Tehran. The incident comes as Iran and Turkey are in a mounting power struggle in the Caucasus. Turkish and Israeli military hardware were vital to Azerbaijan's forces' ouster of the Armenian army last year from the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh enclave, a conflict analysts say that diminished Iran's influence in the region.
Now the Israeli-Azerbaijani ties are closer. The fact now that Turkish-Azerbaijani ties is much closer. The fact that there is a new geopolitical reality in South Caucasus, in which the Iran's role has been downsized, in contrast, the Turkish role has increased, and the Russian role, Russia has asserted its primacy. All of them are the factor that very much makes Iran unhappy.
Iran is now pushing back, along with stepping up diplomatic efforts. In October, Tehran held military exercises for the first time in decades on the Azeri border.
Now Iran is putting pressure on Azerbaijan, diplomatic ties between Iran, Armenia and Russia regarding the Caucasus are getting closer. Iran is organizing, is holding military exercises right next to its border with Azerbaijan. So it can be said that there is a tension in the region that will be durable in the long run.
In a show of support, Turkey held joint military exercises with Azeri forces close to the Iranian border after Tehran's show of force, underscoring how important Ankara is to Baku. Turkey's deepening military ties with Iran's eastern neighbour, Pakistan, are also adding to Tehran's unease, observers say, by stoking sectarian tensions. Turkey and Pakistan are Sunni Muslim countries, and Iran is Shia.
Tehran observes the deepening of the cooperation in security and in military between Pakistan and Turkey, as well as between Turkey, Azerbaijan and Pakistan, because the perception of the regional politics, of the dynamics in the greater Middle East takes place in Iran within of the framework of sectarianism and of the Shia perception.
Iran's crisis-ridden economy depends on trade with Turkey, and that, analysts say, allows Ankara to take a robust stance against Tehran. Dorian Jones of VOA News, Istanbul.
Now, as India and the rest of the world celebrates the Festival of Light, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi continued his tradition of spending Diwali with soldiers. This year at the Nowshera sector in Jammu and Kashmir. Upon reaching the site, the Prime Minister first paid tribute to soldiers who've lost their lives in the line of duty. He met with army troops and shared sweets with them. Addressing the soldiers, PM Modi said it was the capability of the army that ensures the rest of India's 1.3 billion population sleeps peacefully.
मैंने हर दिवाली सीमा पर तैनात आप मेरे परिवारजनों के बीच बिताई है। आज मैं फिर आपके बीच आया हूं, आपसे एक नई ऊर्जा लेकर के जाऊंगा, नया उमंग लेकर के जाऊंगा, नया विश्वास लेकर के जाऊंगा। लेकिन मैं अकेला नहीं आया हूं, मैं मेरे साथ 130 करोड़ देशवासियों के आशीर्वाद आपको लेकर के आया हूं। आप लोग मां भारती का एक जीता जागता सुरक्षा कवच है। आपके सीने में वो जज्बा है जो 130 करोड़ देशवासियों को भरोसा होता है, वो चैन की नींद सो सकते हैं। आपके सामर्थ्य से देश में शांति और सुरक्षा एक निश्चिंतता होती है, एक विश्वास होता है। आपके पराक्रम की वजह से हमारे पर्वों में प्रकाश फैलता है।
Last year, he spent Diwali with soldiers at Jaisalmer in Rajasthan, while in 2019 he celebrated the festival with soldiers in the Rajouri district along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir. And that's all we have on today's WION Live broadcast from London. Thanks for being with us. I'm Ollie Barrett. A very happy Diwali to all those celebrating the Festival of Lights across the world.
This is right, Arab.